Elizabeth Warren is absolutely positively desperate to be Joe Biden's vice presidential running mate. So much so that she's willing to abandon her policies, her own already mediocre progressive policies, to make herself more palatable to Biden and the elite financiers that are driving his campaign. According to a Politico piece that came out earlier today, Elizabeth Warren is pivoting away from Medicare for All. Now, you might say that Warren already pivoted away from Medicare for All when she moved away from Bernie's position and adopted a multi-stage, sort of Medicare for All, but largely not Medicare for All position, which allowed her to basically say she still supported Medicare for All, but without actually having to take the political risk in doing so. She tried to have it both ways. It failed, but even now, she's moving away from her middling position. She said the following to a group of students earlier this week. I think right now people want to see improvements in our healthcare system, and that means strengthening the Affordable Care Act. That's Biden's position. Now, Warren will say that unlike Biden, I have a long-term desire for single payer. Biden has said I'd veto single payer if I had the opportunity to pass it. Whereas Warren seems to be saying now, look, I want to do single payer someday in the future, in the far future, but now we need to make Obamacare better, which is basically the Biden position, and it's been the Biden position all along, that you scaffold a public option, lower Medicare age accessibility onto Obamacare rather than build a system that once and for all breaks down the broken model of having your insurance tied to your workplace and the broken model of profit driving healthcare decisions instead of human needs driving healthcare decisions. Biden and now Warren want to preserve that broken system. And Warren is doing all of this because she wants to be vice president. There's no other explanation. This is a person that, while we had a lot of criticisms of her on the left from the Bernie Sanders camp, was always still quite a bit further left than Joe Biden and a lot of the other Democratic Party frontrunners. And she probably realizes that if she wants to be vice president, she has to kind of cull every bit of progressive policy that isn't deemed palatable, safe for the Wall Street financial backers of Biden's campaign and, of course, Trump's campaign as well. And that's what she's doing. And Medicare for All is perhaps the biggest single policy that would make her, inappropriate, unacceptable to the rich and wealthy and well-connected. And while we already feel she abandoned it, they obviously didn't, and she's making that move. And it's really sad to see, because as much as I've already given up on Warren, given up any pretense of liking Warren or respecting Warren or thinking that she could be a good second alternative to Bernie Sanders, it's still sad to see her abandon even her weak progressive policies, all for a job that she probably won't get. I don't think she's going to be the VP. There's some polling that indicates that she'd be popular as a choice. There's some polling that indicates that, despite the fact that the most vocal Bernie Sanders supporters like myself have given up on Warren, that she's popular with the Bernie base. Maybe not the most engaged Bernie people, but the people that said they supported Bernie during the primary, they're largely behind Warren more than any other of the frontrunners. And there's an argument to be made that she's, sharp and she brings a lot of policy experience and could be a good governing vice president. But I don't know if that argument is going to hold. Because one, she has no direct executive experience. She's never been a mayor or a governor. She's never been vice president, obviously. She's never been president. She doesn't have that experience, unlike people like Gretchen Whitmer, who is being considered and is currently a governor. You might also argue that she doesn't represent a key demographic like Kamala Harris or Stacey Abrams, who represent black women. A core, an essential part of any Democratic victory is the strength of the black female vote in terms of their ultimate turnout. And if you want to maximize that turnout, a black woman vice president might play a role. You could also argue that Elizabeth Warren doesn't bring any youth to the ticket. Joe Biden's in his late 70s, but Warren's in her early 70s. You might not want a ticket of two people in their 70s. And so you might want somebody that's at least in their 50s when it comes to picking a vice presidential nominee. And you would also want to consider what they bring in terms of their state and their region. And Kamala Harris doesn't really bring much. She represents a very blue state. But both Stacey Abrams, Gretchen Whitmer, and Amy Klobuchar either come from swing states or from swing regions. Whitmer's from a swing state in a swing region. Klobuchar is not from a swing state. Minnesota's pretty safely blue, but she is from that region. And Stacey Abrams is from a Georgia that is now, at least according to some polling, accessible to the Democrats in statewide elections. Warren brings none of that. 70-year-old white progressive from New England who finished third in her very, very blue state. She's not going to be the pick. I don't think so anyway. I don't think she's considered a favorite, even if she polls well in the job. And she's doing all of this to get picked for a job that I don't think's accessible to her. She's abandoning everything she believes in, or at least that we thought she believed in, that her supporters likely believed in, that people who respected her, even if they were in the Bernie camp, maybe for a while thought she believed. Elizabeth Warren is basically ending any pretense that she's a progressive leader. And if she wanted the faintest hope of building a governing coalition in a 2024 run, like let's say Trump wins, God forbid, it could happen. If Trump wins in 2020, then in 2024, the Democrats will need another nominee, and it will almost certainly be Warren who wants to run. But she's lost the Bernie base, and if she gives up on things like Medicare for all, even more than she already has, she'll lose a lot of the Bernie Sanders folks who were still sort of with her because they still think that, she's better than the rest. I don't see this as a good move. I see this as thirsty, as desperate, and without even getting anything in return. It's sort of like how I noted that Stacey Abrams, lied for Joe Biden about Tara Reade, and then on air, she had her face shift when she realized that I might be doing all of this lying for nothing. And I wonder when or if Warren's going to have that realization that she's selling out her even moderate progressive values for nothing. Warren will lose progressives here, and it doesn't make sense. If the argument to pick Warren is she can bring you progressives, then Warren shedding what makes her seen as progressive by progressives will neutralize that fact. Warren's not going to be the VP no matter how much she changes herself.